Welcome. My name is Ayelet Lerner, and it is my honor to be here today to give a short introduction for this ceremony in which we will commemorate Jacob Ullman, who was deported from this exact place on the day of the Jewish New Year, 12 September 1942. First of all, I would like to welcome John Stienen, the person who has requested this stumbling stone today, and some representatives of the Muziek community. There are so many people to thank for making this moment possible, for giving us the chance to keep alive the memory of our family members who perished in the Holocaust. I will do my best to keep it as brief as I can. The Stumbling Stone Project was founded by the German artist Gunther Demnig. One of his inspirations for the work came from a quote shared with him by a rabbi from the Talmud. A person is only forgotten when their name is no longer remembered. Just 1 year ago marked the 100,000th stumbling stone placed in Europe. 100,000 names remembered, people remembered. In Antwerp, the Stumbling Stone Project is entirely run and organized by a group of around 10 non-Jewish volunteers. On Sunday, 27 April, only a couple of weeks ago, they were responsible for the placing of the 250th stumbling stone in the city of Antwerp. I want to take a moment to acknowledge Willem Kennis, who leads this incredible effort in Antwerp. I learned that his great-uncle, Jan de Rieder, was a member of the Deurne Police Corps during the war and one of the resistance heroes in that force, warning Jews of upcoming razzias and helping some to escape. These courageous acts resonate strongly with the work of today's volunteers. Quiet and determined acts of great care and heroism. I would also like to offer a special thank you to Wim Verheesen, who is placing this stumbling stone today, to Tatjana Scheck for her moving musical contribution, and to Ricky van Dijk, who films these ceremonies and manages the project's website. His important work means that these moments are documented for families today and for generations to come. The stumbling stone we place today for Jacob Ullman was requested by John Stienen, who joins us here from Den Haag. John is a historian with a deep interest in Ukraine and World War II. His research eventually led him to the story of Jacob Ullman and to this commemoration today. Before we hear from John and learn more about Jacob's life, I want to conclude by saying this. As a Jewish woman and a descendant of a family deported from Antwerp, I am continually moved and inspired by the dedication and commitment of our non-Jewish allies. It is thanks to their tireless efforts that the memory of those we lost is preserved and will continue to be part of Antwerp's collective history. I warmly welcome John Stienen to share his valuable findings with us.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. We are gathered here today to commemorate Jacob Ullman, and the story I'm telling starts in the midst of the 19th century in Austria-Hungary, in the border area between Romania and Hungary nowadays, which is where Noah Tzvi Ullman, Jacob's father, was born and raised and married. And the family then moved to Budapest, where the oldest son Solomon was born. And from then on, in the third quarter of the 19th century, they finally moved here to Antwerp, where the family then was extended to include at least nine children who would become adults. The story then continues at a point in World War I when the family decides to flee Antwerp because of the war, just as 1 million Belgians came to the Netherlands which at that time had only a population of 6 million. So there was quite a huge influx of people from Belgium, including many Jews as well. And this is when the community he was part of then moved to Scheveningen. And this is also where, after the war, Noach Tzvi then died in Scheveningen in 1916. So the widow was there with 9 children. And part of the family then stayed in the Netherlands, and the other part, the part of the family returned back to Antwerp when World War I was over. In 1920, the second son became the director of an orphanage, the Jewish orphanage of The Hague. And that is where he then, with his family, remained until they were deported, sadly, in 1943 from The Hague. Jacob then, in the 1920s, moved to Amsterdam, where he was a diamond trader, which probably linked him to the community here, because we are here, of course, in the center of Antwerp's diamond district. And in 1931, not only did he become a mohel, which means that he was allowed to perform the bris, so the circumcision, but he also decided to become a Dutch, so he naturalized to become a Dutchman. He then continued to live in Amsterdam, and the reason I found him, because this is what people wonder about, so why is this Dutch guy standing here telling this story about a Jewish guy that he didn't know and is not a relative? The reason I found him is that the place where he was living in Amsterdam, he rented a room in the house of another religious person who had died in 1915, and his widow was renting out rooms, and there were many learned religious Jewish persons living there, and Jacob was one of them. But the person who was rented out was related to Etty Hillesum, and Etty Hillesum, sometimes jokingly say, is like the Anne Frank for adults. So she was a Jewish person in the Netherlands keeping a diary. The diary became known after she was killed in the Shoah. And this, from the 1980s onwards, the diary was published. And now, 7 years ago, I was asked to help, because of my interest in Ukraine, as was mentioned, to trace the relatives of Etty Hillesum in the Russian Empire. And I even managed to find the descendants of the relatives who currently live in Israel. So this is how somehow he was connected, because he was living in the house of the relatives of Etty Hillesum in Amsterdam. And we laid there 3 years ago another stumbling stone on that very spot. And then came the question, but why is there only a stumbling stone for Paulina, who was the landlady, and not for Jacob? And then the answer was because Jacob was living during the war here in Antwerp. So now 3 years later, we are standing here because sadly at the beginning of the German occupation of Netherlands in May 1940, so 85 years ago, in 2 weeks' time, Jacob decided from Amsterdam to come back to Antwerp, to this very place where his mother lived, and he and his mother tried to flee to France to somehow then escape the German occupation, because of course they already had some experience of occupation during World War I, which is why they wanted to escape again. But their escape to France was shortcut because the Germans reached the coast south of Dunkirk, and this is how they had to come back. So in the course of May-June 1940, they decided to come back here, which is what they did. And then the tragic part of the story is that Jacob then came here, but because he was Dutch, he had less protection than other Jews living here, because in 1942, during the big razzias, the Germans were primarily aiming for non-Belgian Jews. And as a matter of fact, the eldest brother of Jacob, Salomon, was the chairperson of the Belgian Judenraad. And after his brother was deported in September 1942, Salomon then resigned as being the president of the Judenraad. So so we are here today to remember Jacob, who was Dutch who came back. And his mother actually survived still 2 more years, and she died on this place in 1944, and not as a result of the Shoah. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you.
Malei Rachamim shoychev bein bamroimim Hametzei menuchon achoyno al kanfei yashechino Malais kedaishim utahayerim kezayarokiya matzirim es nishmas Reb Yaakov Dov ben Moreinu Aram dayach tzvi shiolach li'oilomoi Mavu shoim bemekan mispalelim ba'ad nishmuso Megan Megan Eden Taim and Chosai Lochein Malei Rachamim Yastireyo V'tzeisek Novav Li'oilomim V'yitzroyer V'tzroyer Achayim Es Nishmuso Adinoyu Nachalosai Ve'yonuach V'shalom Al Mishkavo
conclude this ceremony today, I would like to extend a thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time to be here and mark this moment. Exactly 80 years since the end of World War II. The times we are currently living in through are uncertain and unpredictable. Each one of us can contribute in making a difference, like the Ullman family did all those years ago, pillars of the Jewish community in Antwerp, which we continue to lean on today, like Willem Kennis and his unwavering dedication to this project, and like John Stienen has done today, reminding us of the strength of remembrance and unity. Thank you all.